having a consistent mission that we're all trying to achieve, and we all know that mission is really key to creating a consistent customer experience. If you start with, I have this idea, I want to go build X. First of all, you don't know if it aligns to anything they ever care about. Second of all, nobody likes a solution that they didn't have a part in deciding what the solution was. At GoCardless, we focus more on net retention as our key metric that we're optimizing for. And in this fiscal year, we're also very focused on time to live, as you mentioned earlier. So those are the primary behaviors that the CSMs are pushing for.
This is the Launch Station, the only place you need to look for all things customer onboarding, implementation, and customer success. Tune in for insights from industry experts every week.
Hey everyone, welcome to yet another episode of the Launch Station. Today we have with us Jess Osborn. Jess currently is VP of Customer Success International at GoCardless. And prior to this, she has spent a lot of her time in customer-facing roles in customer success, onboarding, driving adoption at companies like Bazaarvoice, Blackbaud, Findhelp. And she's super passionate about helping companies and people be the best version of themselves. Welcome to the show today, Jess.
Thank you, Shri. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. In line with what her experience and her current role is, the topic that we're taking up is going international, enabling the right customer experience and adapting your customer onboarding journeys for a global product. But before we jump into the topic, we'll start with a little bit of a lighter question. Jess, if you had an unlimited budget in your current role, what's the first thing you would do?
So I loved this question, and I went simple, which is just get all of my team face to face. So we've just been through a lot of change, and we're very globally distributed. I have team all across the time zones, Australia, New Zealand, a lot of team in France, a little bit in the UK, and then all across North America. And I would just love for us all to be in one room together as we embark on a new phase of the journey. And we haven't been able to do that yet. So if I had unlimited budget, I would have made that happen yesterday.
That's nice. And we are hoping if we hit a certain milestone as a company, we bring everyone together in Thailand early next year. So let's see how that goes.
Oh, so you've got similar aspirations.
Yeah. So we'll start with customer experience, Jess. What strategies do you use to ensure customer experience is consistent when people are working with different team members of yours across the globe in all these different regions?
Yes. So I think, first of all, having a consistent mission that we're all trying to achieve, and we all know that mission is really key to creating a consistent customer experience. There's a lot of other different aspects that go into creating a consistent experience, from having the tools and the processes in place that make it easy for the team to facilitate the customer experience. And then obviously measuring that customer experience is also really important. And you get the insights from the measurement of what is working, what's not working. You get the qualitative feedback alongside the quantitative, and then you kind of know what you need to address.
Right. And today, how do you come up with that right vision statement for your team? What's the thought that went behind it? Has it evolved over time?
It definitely has evolved over time. So both my role at the company and then also the vision, not even just at my level, actually, the company itself has been through 3 different strategic vision statements during the time that I've been here in just 2 years. So I think when you're coming up with a vision statement for your team, you have to know what the overall company is trying to achieve. And based on that, understanding what value you and your team bring to the business to accomplish that. And then how do you articulate the vision simply that everyone can kind of attach to? And so when I first joined we thought that we wanted to be a more commercially focused team. And then we realized that our strategy was actually to make our customers successful so that our business would be successful. So that was one pivot that we went through. And then more recently, I mentioned we've got kind of a new journey going on. I used to have a global role across one function, and now I have a role that's the rest of the world outside of the UK and Ireland, and it's multifunctional. And so the vision for this new role is actually about how do we help our business find fit internationally, and how do we do that by really understanding our international customer needs and helping them to succeed. So it's kind of evolved over the time that I've been at the company.
Interesting. Would that mean it's not just about knowing your product and trying to make that fit with the customer, but rather understanding customer needs and taking that back to product as well?
Yes, that's a huge part of it. So GoCardless is a company that grew primarily out of the UK. About 80% of our business is UK based. And I think originally we tried to take that product and just insert it into the various international markets that we serve. And on that journey, we've learned that that doesn't work as seamlessly as actually knowing the customers and the requirements in different markets and really taking that into account. So being able to understand the nuances in each market, and to be able to feed that back to product and to help them understand what changes are going to make the most impact on the market is definitely, it's a science and an art at the same time.
Right. Yeah, because it feels like there'll be some things that you need to teach your customer as well based on what you've learned works for your product, and they may come from a different world. And there'll be some other things that you need to learn from customers that are specific to that market, perhaps.
Yes.
How do you make these decisions? How do you balance the customer feedback with being a little more data driven in your decision making and optimizing the customer journey?
Yeah, I think on this, I firmly believe you have to use both qualitative and quantitative data. I think businesses tend to over-index on quantitative data, and then they kind of miss the story. Early in my career, I learned this lesson because I was at Bazaarvoice helping companies look at reviews of their products and figure out how to use that data. And it was crazy how the buying teams at these huge retailers all around the world would typically just give the manufacturers that they were buying from data about what was selling and what wasn't. And it was hard to negotiate because it was purely down to, well, this is selling, this isn't, or this is getting a lot of returns. But the why behind all of that was a mystery because they had a bunch of quantitative data, but not a lot of qualitative data. And what reviews allowed them to have was actually the qualitative that helped them see that, oh, this ice maker keeps getting returned because it's not that it doesn't work, it's just that it's really noisy and it annoys people and people don't like the sound. And so suddenly the manufacturer has something that they can go solve. And so I think that's why qualitative data is also important. Sales data obviously matters, but if you don't know why something's getting returned or why something's not selling, it's really hard to solve the problem. So I think a mix of both helps you figure out, oh, in our customer experience, what we found out in North America was that our compliance team was asking for the social security number of the people who were running the company. And if you imagine, if we were working with Microsoft, we're not, but if we were going to Satya and asking for his social, it's not information that's just going to be easily given up in the US. And so essentially we had to learn that, yes, in certain business sizes, asking for the social is what we have to do, but if there are other things that we could use in the US market, it would make the process a lot easier. So that's just one example of where we had a process that we thought worked based on a UK view, and we had to listen to customers and solve that problem to make it easier for businesses.
Love the ice maker example. And yeah, I think what this also tells me is when you're going to hear those qualitative inputs from the customer and take it to your product team, perhaps to say, hey, we need to change our approach of what we're collecting, or change how something works, or even take it back to the global team and say, hey, we need to change our approach in these different markets. Our process needs to adapt. I'm sure there is pushback, there is alignment you need to seek between the different teams to overall make the customer successful. Uh, how do you sort of go about your process of when, which battles to pick, which battles to fight, and how to create the right alignment internally?
So I think there's a couple ways to know which battles to pick. I feel like that's one of the things that you learn the more you try to go pick certain ones and you see how it turns out. I think one is understanding the context and the big picture of what the business is trying to accomplish and how much the specific battle you're trying to pick aligns to getting in the same direction of where the business wants to go. So if you have a battle you're trying to pick that's going to accelerate, it's going to be a force multiplier for something the business is trying to accomplish, that's a good time to say, okay, this battle is worth fighting. So that's one thing I look at. Another thing I look at often is timing. So I think a lot of times we try to solve something, and there's a ton of examples of businesses out there that have solved a particular problem and they were too early and the rest of the market just wasn't quite there yet. And then it's like the company that was doing Roku before Roku and things like that. And so it's like, it was the right idea, it was the wrong time. And so I think you have to remind yourself to stay sane. Like maybe you have the right idea, but maybe your business just isn't at the level of maturity that this idea is at the right time. So I think in addition to understanding, is this in alignment with where the business is going? It's understanding what level of maturity are we at, and would this be the right time to introduce this particular idea? So I'd say those are the two key factors I use to then decide, is it worth it? And then how I work with somebody from a different department is I understand what they're trying to accomplish. I understand their goals. And then I try to think about, how does what I'm trying to solve relate back to something they're trying to solve? And I always lead with the why. So if you say, I'm trying to solve this problem because of this, I think you might be interested in it too. Instead of saying, I have this idea, I want to go build X. If you start with, I have this idea, I want to go build X. First of all, you don't know if it aligns to anything they ever care about. Second of all, nobody likes a solution that they didn't have a part in deciding what the solution was. So by starting with why and understanding how it relates to what they care about, it just is a lot easier to influence somebody to come along with you on that journey.
Another question I had was, in specific product, right? Often has so many things going on, so many requests, feature requests coming from customers in different geographies. How do you help drive the right conversation with product teams to build in a way that it's going to cater to the key needs of like all of the markets that you're dealing with?
Yeah, you have to understand prioritization to work with any type of, because what you just said, product market managers are always dealing with tons of stakeholders, tons of requests, and they have to prioritize what they work on. And so the more you can understand the way that they think about prioritizing, and even if they've built a process for how to prioritize, going to them speaking the same language makes a huge difference in being able to get something done. So at more mature companies I've worked at, where they already have a way of gauging the business impact of an idea, and they need to know X, Y, and Z to be able to move something forward, you just fill out the form and you make sure that the right stakeholders are aware of the request, and that can move things along. But I've also worked in earlier stage companies where they don't know how they prioritize, and sometimes leaning in to help them build how they prioritize and being a stakeholder in that can actually build the relationship that allows you to then work together on consistently prioritizing together. So again, depending on the stage, but I think it's all about a shared understanding of how prioritization is done and making sure that there's strong relationships and stakeholder management happening both ways with the product team.
Got it. Coming back to customer experience itself, right? So what are some metrics you track or ways you get feedback inputs that tells you, how successful you are in creating the right customer experience or the customer journey?
Mhm. So yeah, we use a couple different metrics for that. So on the implementation side and also with support, we have CSAT built into our implementation and support flows. So after every project closure or after every ticket closure, we are able to get the customer satisfaction of that part of their journey. And one of the cool things we've done, we are a Rocket Lane customer, and so we love that tool for helping our whole flow with our customers. We also have integration with Slack that helps us to be able to have a channel that every time a customer gives us implementation feedback, it's almost just like this live feed that all of us have visibility of. So that also motivates the team because they see each other's feedback. And I think that's another way that we kind of create that consistent customer experience, is that we all have that visibility of that feedback. And so we're all motivated to try to make that feedback really as positive, because it's nice. It's really exciting when the feedback comes through and it's like, yeah, that's great feedback. And we can all give each other a shout out off the back of it. And you know what? Hard feedback's good too. That's something I learned in the reviews business. It's not about a negative review being the end of the world. It's what you do with that information, how you respond. And a lot of times, if you can take a negative piece of feedback and follow up on it, that really shows the customer that you're listening, and you can build even a stronger relationship off the back of turning something from a negative to a positive.
Yeah, it's actually one of the early lessons I had in customer experience was, if you delivered a great experience, you get a 9 on 10. If you made a mistake and recovered spectacularly from it, you actually get a 10 on 10, because the customer now knows even when things go wrong, they can really trust you. So I think
Exactly.
that's yeah.
100%.
What about metrics? Are there any key metrics you can track other than, okay, CSAT is one, but is there anything else
Yeah.
that you measure to understand how your, time to live or anything like that you're all tracking?
Yes, and actually, just to stay on the customer experience side, that's the CSAT is the transactional customer satisfaction metric. We also, as a business, do NPS. And we use that as a corporate metric, because ultimately, if your customer base is a net promoter, it's the representation of the entire experience of the company that the customer has that makes them a promoter or not. Our CSMs facilitate getting our customers to respond, the managed base of customers to respond to that. We also have a self-serve base where the NPS goes out to on a regular cadence as well. And all of that rolls up into a top line corporate metric that we're trying to continue to improve. So I think customer satisfaction is something that gets measured in different ways. And I think NPS is the more holistic and kind of corporate level metric. CSAT is more transactional and kind of time bound based on various experiences. And I would say on a CSM team, a really great metric for CSAT is actually advocacy and referenceability. So if you can have customers who are willing to be a reference for you, ones who do videos, case studies, et cetera, with you, that means you actually turn that customer not just into somebody who's a customer, but one who's actually trying to help you win other customers. So I'd say those are kind of all the different dimensions of how we look at the customer experience.
Do you actually set advocacy related goals for the team, like so many case studies or testimonials, or is it just something you're tracking but not really rewarding on?
Yeah, it's a great point. At GoCardless, we focus more on net retention as our key metric that we're optimizing for. And in this fiscal year, we're also very focused on time to live, as you mentioned earlier. So those are the primary behaviors that the CSMs are pushing for. But what we do is we take the 4 strategic corporate pillars that we have, and we make our role relevant to each pillar. And one of our pillars is get competitive, which is part of that product market fit. And so customer advocacy and then also giving feedback to product are the actions that a CSM does that, and also implementation managers do, that feed into that particular pillar. So while it's not, we have this many case studies we need to generate type goal, it is something that each team member knows by doing this work, it's helping us accomplish one of the strategic pillars of the business. And we actually have an advocacy team at GoCardless. They're an amazing team, and they're constantly generated content. So they actually are the ones that have the targets on how much to go do, and we're just their partners to go make that happen.
Nice. Good to understand how that's set up, and gives me some ideas that we can borrow from as well.
Cool.
So you're growing international, different geographies, and I'm sure business is, growing in each of these geographies because you're essentially an enabler for all of these businesses to collect easier from their customers, right? So
Correct.
what strategies do you recommend for, scaling the customer onboarding process as you add more people, try to onboard more and more customers in each geography?
Yeah. So I think a huge part of being able to scale any experience is, for me, it's always documentation, and that's internally and externally. And I think when you're really trying to scale, having an external customer facing resource where the customer can get what they need, so they don't always have to go back to an individual to seek out information, is one key aspect of scale. Another thing is paying attention to, what I love about Rocket Lane is it's very clear what our steps in our process are, and we can go through all of those steps. If you have a step that's like a constantly repeated step that's very manual, those are great tasks to look at. Well, how do we digitize or automate that part of the experience so that we're not having to consistently throw man hours at it? So those are two tips that I would use, is just think about how can you create sources of information that a customer could self-serve with. And then if there are things that the team is doing repeatedly, how do we make this more streamlined? And I'm just a huge fan of Lean and Six Sigma type projects where, I know sometimes it's hard. I think you and I talked about this before I was here today, that, professional services, it's an hourly game and you got to just go. So you don't always have time to do an improvement project like that. So if you have a programmatic resource that you can pull in to just look at your process end to end and do some lean optimization, that can really make a big impact on how efficiently you're able to do work.
How often would you recommend taking that relook at things, assess, what needs improvement? Is it like a quarterly thing, or 6 months at a time before you collect enough data, feedback, etc., to identify what to improve on?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think sometimes the time, it's all about statistical significance with the data. So if you're dealing with a large volume, you might get to that in a month versus 6 months. So I think you got to look at like what scale you're operating at, and also what resources are available. Because while I'd love to say, oh, you should do this every quarter or whatever, a lot of times projects don't have the bandwidth to do it that regularly. What I will say is one of the best ways to motivate a team is to empower them with the ability to make the processes that they operate in day in, day out, like they have a say in it. So I would say, if nothing else, ask your team and like document what you feel like isn't working. And so when you do get that project resource, that feedback is readily available for them to use to then go dig into some of the problems. Also, if you have documentations of your workflows, that also makes it a lot easier for somebody to come in. So yeah, I guess I wish there was like a silver bullet answer to that, but I think it's kind of dependent on a lot of different factors.
Got it. Makes perfect sense. So, let's talk about lasting customer experience, right? Like not just what happened during onboarding, or how do you as a brand create a customer experience that feels forever? What strategies would you use?
Yeah. So I think when it feels forever to me, that just means that it's an experience that you really want to stick with forever. Like you've made a lasting impression. And I think we've all had those moments. And I think there are books out there about how Disney actually goes through the whole park at the eye level of the majority of the children going through and sees exactly what they see and how do you make something special. And so I think that's a lot of the tips I've been talking about to this point are like, how do you scale? But I think the other thing you've got to think about is how do we make this human? And so as you're building stuff out, sometimes it's in the professional world really easy to be super dry or to just like not think about the exciting milestone of a new customer or like really put yourself in their shoes and think about, wow, what would make this just so cool? And some things that we were able to do, and I shouldn't take credit for it, it's actually Hamish Wood, my partner in crime at GoCardless, put in place was this welcome pack for some of our customers. And I actually got a chance to get one of them and they're pretty cool. They come with like a little terrain map and like a bag and various things. And so as you're starting as a new customer, like, wow, like I've got this notebook, I've got all these cool things. That's the fancy side of stuff. You don't always have to make it fancy. It can also be as simple as they've just experienced their first payout is like a big thing for us. So let's send them a celebration email to say congratulations and recognize the win in that part of the journey. So it's how do you insert the human or the creative moments in addition to the scale side of things.
I think this conversation just keeps giving me new ideas that we need to borrow from and implement at Rocket Lane. So super cool with that sort of welcome kit and sort of on brand, right? For GoCardless, I would say you try to be this sort of modern company. How would you describe GoCardless as a brand?
Ooh, that's such a great question. The thing that comes to my mind, we did a rebrand and we're trying to destroy dinosaurs I have this image of this T-Rex like, and the idea of like the dinosaur is we're trying to modernize payments. And in the US today, so many people still use checks. It's kind of like you go to other countries and they're like, you use what? But like these things are, how we still do payments and they're super outdated. And so I think we definitely are trying to modernize the space. And I think we're trying to do it with a lot of heart. We're part of the Tech Zero initiative. We're trying to be sustainable. GoCardless means like get rid of all the plastic and the cards that we use and also the fees. So yeah, I think we are a brand that really cares deeply while also trying to modernize.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that shows in a lot of interactions I've had with your company. So that's so cool.
Yeah.
Last question on this topic. What are top of mind challenges you have today?
So for me today, we are definitely trying to expedite how quickly we can get customers live and transacting. We're shifting from a go-to-market motion internationally where historically we've contracted for a payment volume to more of a pay-as-you-go model. And this means that the faster that we get customers live, the more predictable and kind of more revenue our business earns. So time really is literally money with that model. So anything that we can do to streamline that process is definitely a big top of mind challenge that we're trying to solve.
Awesome. We move to the next section of our podcast, which is just like a few quick questions to learn more about you. Beaches or mountains and why?
I'm mountains. I love the experience of climbing a mountain and especially that feeling when you get to the top and you get to see the beautiful view. I think that's definitely just something that feels right for the type of person that I am. And I also am not a huge fan of sand, even though I love a ocean. If we could do the ocean without the sand, I'd be happier about it.
Cool. Tell me about something you watched, read, or heard that this year that's changed your perspective in some way.
When I think about this question, I think about paradigm shifts because there was COVID, and during COVID, George Floyd, and there were all of these moments in history recently that were literally paradigm shifts that changed my perspective a lot as we went through them together. And I was thinking about, okay, so 2023, like we're kind of over COVID. What has been that moment this year? And for me, I think it's just AI has become so incredibly prevalent. So it's not necessarily something I heard or read, but it's more something I've experienced, which is interacting with ChatGPT. And it's just kind of crazy. And for me, the big thing that it does for my perspective is it raises the bar on the need for continuous growth. Because my husband the other day was asking it a question because he was having a challenge with his team and he was trying to make sure that he was doing the performance management right. And he got an answer and he's like, yep, I've done that. I've done that. I've done that. He was like, cool. Like I'm as smart as ChatGPT. But then he was like, wait a second, it's continuing to learn. And so basically it knows as much as I know for this many years of experience that I have, but like eventually it's going to know even more. So I think it's a good catalyst for us to keep trying to learn and develop.
And maybe even innovate, right? So one of the interesting things I found is because, at least in onboarding, there are only so many products out there. There's only so much content out there. If ChatGPT has to learn, it's only from us.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah. What's your favorite quote?
My favorite quote, there is one by Eleanor Roosevelt, and hopefully I quote it well. It's, we have to do the things we believe we cannot. And I just think it's kind of along the mountain theme. And I guess the other quote that I always love is life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. It's basically like a lot of times it's easy to be afraid of what we haven't done before, and to just stay kind of safe. But ultimately, the more we take on the challenges we didn't think was possible, and we push ourselves outside of what we know, I find that that's really where you learn the most and you develop the most. And as you mentioned earlier, I love to help people be their best selves. And I think they are their best selves when they're in that mode of taking things on and learning and growing.
Right. Yeah. If they didn't learn something about the new thing they picked up, they at least will learn something about themselves.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Right. Cool. We're down to the last question of our episode, Jess. What advice do you have for fellow leaders?
I think I might actually refer to another quote that I don't know where it originated, but a friend of mine that I worked with told me, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. I go back to that every time I'm in one of those places where I'm looking at something that I'm like, I don't know if I can do it. I just remember, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And it just makes it less intimidating to take on what you're looking at. So hopefully that can be useful for someone else.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing all your wisdom.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.